Thanks very much. First of all, thank you to IPFD for the opportunity to speak today, and also thanks to the other speakers for the very interesting presentations that we've had so far. And thanks to Alison Skipper for referencing RSPCA's work in her presentation yesterday. So by way of introduction, I'm Ashleigh Brown. I'm Scientific and Policy Manager at the RSPCA in the UK, and I'm an animal behaviour and welfare scientist by background. I manage our organisation's portfolio of work to address extreme conformation in companion animals. And today I'll be sharing an update on how we're looking to address this welfare issue via a multi-stakeholder programme of activities aimed at creating human behaviour change. I recognise we've got an international audience here today, so I'll start with a few words of introduction to the RSPCA. This is the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, which was founded back in 1824. So at over 200 years old, we are the world's oldest animal welfare charity and the largest in the UK. The RSPCA's aim is to inspire everyone to create a better world for every animal. And in line with that, we do have a broad species remit. So we cover companion animals. So that's those kept as pets or for working animals, and also includes equine animals. We cover wildlife, farmed animals, and animals used in science. We also have a broad remit of charitable activities, which includes advocacy for animals and prevention of cruelty and neglect. And we do that through education, research, public campaigns, and advocacy with government and policymakers in the UK. We also have a huge rescue and care function, helping animals in immediate need, and that's delivered through a network of animal rescue centres, branches, and animal hospitals that provide accommodation, treatment, rehabilitation, and rehoming or release in the case of wild animals for thousands of animals every year. And we have a team of inspectors and animal rescue officers who do that difficult work on the front line. Related to that, the RSPCA also performs an enforcement function, responding to reports of abuse or neglect, injured wildlife, and potential criminal activity involving animals. And we conduct investigations, rescue operations, intelligence gathering, and prosecution of animal-related criminal offences. And that makes us one of the primary enforcers of the UK's Animal Welfare Act. To be clear, we are an animal welfare charity and not an animal rights activist group. And that means that we recognise that animals can be used in the service of humans, but we expect that their welfare is optimised and that they're not subjected to unnecessary suffering, and that legislation sufficiently protects animals from harm and is appropriately enforced. This also means that to some extent, we're duty bound by our charitable remit to do what we can to address emergent animal welfare problems, such as extreme conformation. And we're accountable to our supporters for doing what we can to address these issues. The work I'm speaking about today is an example of the advocacy and prevention area of the charity's wider work. So the imperative to address extreme conformation was identified as a strategic priority within the RSPCA's current organisational strategy, and that includes ending harmful selling and breeding of pets in England and Wales as one of 9 key ambitions. As I'm sure everyone in this audience is aware what we mean by extreme conformation, we're referring to physical traits that are harmful to the animals, that are exaggerated to an unnatural extent and have been intentionally bred into companion animal species. So why was this considered a priority for us? As an animal welfare charity, we were increasingly concerned about both the prevalence and severity of harmful traits being bred into a range of companion animal species, notably dogs, cats, and rabbits, who are very popular pets in the UK. But sadly, we also see examples in reptiles, fish, birds, and even some in horses. I've put some examples on the slide here, and you might note from the images, for example, in dogs and cats, we see things like skull, spinal, skin, coat abnormalities, and taillessness, so absent tails. In rabbits, we also see brachycephaly, ear abnormalities, dental abnormalities, and dwarfism. In reptiles, we see reptiles being bred without scales and colour morphs, colour variants that increase risks of neurological abnormalities or skin tumours, for example. In birds, particularly some pigeons, we see some significant plumage and postural abnormalities that impair the bird's abilities to fly. And in goldfish, several varieties of goldfish, we see ocular, fin, and scale abnormalities that impair their swimming ability and general quality of life. So when we put this all together, we're seeing fish who can't swim, birds who can't fly, snakes without scales, cats who can't go outside, and dogs who can't wag their tails or don't have tails to wag. And for us, this really highlighted the need to strengthen societal understanding of even some of the most basic animal welfare concepts and species-specific needs. And with the RSPCA having a charitable remit to prevent suffering, it was clear that we did have a responsibility to use our voice and influence to raise awareness of the problem and try to mobilise action to address it, especially before things potentially deteriorate even further for some of these less common species that are currently less commonly affected. In terms of scale, as many of you will be aware, data indicate that across Europe, there's an estimated 18 million dogs, 22 million cats, and 4 million small mammals, small companion mammals, who are of breeds that typically exhibit extreme traits. And in the UK, it's estimated that over 20% of the dog population are breeds who typically have at least one extreme conformation. These figures don't necessarily reflect animals who are cross or mixed breeds who might also have extreme traits. Therefore, this is likely to be an underestimation of the scale. In terms of welfare impact, the RSPCA's interest in animals with extreme traits is purely based on the concern around welfare impairment. And we recognise that this issue affects the physical, mental, and natural aspects of animal welfare in multiple ways. But we've found that this isn't particularly well understood throughout the lay public, and even some pet owners themselves fail to recognise welfare impairment in their own pets. For example, some people perceive behaviours as comical or believe that they're normal for the breed, when in fact some of these behaviours are indicative of suffering. And some examples in dogs that I'm sure you'll be familiar with are things like snoring or tongues protruding while the animal's at rest, sleeping upright, or potentially being labelled as lazy, when of course we know that these behavioural and postural abnormalities likely indicate a problem with the dog's normal functioning. So our focus is on harmful physical traits. We're not concerned about other aesthetic features that don't cause harm. So our approach to this problem is very much trait focused and not breed focused. So while we might reference some examples of particular breeds to illustrate some of the traits we're talking about, we're not calling for bans on any breeds, and we're not advocating for breed-specific legislation. Our concern is just that animals, including dogs, are bred into bodies that allow them to live healthy and happy lives and perform species-appropriate behaviours. So it's a trait-focused approach rather than a breed-focused approach. I wanted to say a few words just about the impact of this problem on charities and animal welfare and health professionals. So the scale of the scale of the ownership of pets with extreme traits does have direct repercussions for charities' rescue and rehoming operations. So the huge increases in the prevalence of affected pets has also led to significant increase in these types of pets being relinquished to charities or confiscated and coming into our care. And some of the factors that contribute to this are that often these animals have higher care needs, and some owners are sadly unwilling or unable to meet those higher levels of care and keep the animals in a suitable welfare state. Another contributing factor, which has been in the media quite a lot recently in the UK, are very high veterinary costs and high and rising veterinary costs for treatment. And of course, animals who are likely to require more treatment are more affected by that, or their owners and families are more affected by those higher costs. And again, some owners are unable to pay or unwilling to pay these increased costs. And we've also seen general increases in the prevalence and desirability of some breeds who have extreme traits. And sadly, these animals, regardless of breed, no animal is immune to cruelty and neglect, and therefore, just as a representation of the wider population, we see more animals with extreme conformations confiscated, as sadly they're also affected by cruelty and neglect, as well as all others. And just to give some illustrative figures, in the 10 years from 2015 to 2024, the RSPCA saw a ninefold increase in the numbers of pugs and French bulldogs coming into our care. And some examples from cats, in 5 years from 2020 to 2025, we saw a 138% increase in British Shorthairs and an 89% increase in Persian cats coming into our care. And I'm sure you can imagine the toll that this takes on animal charities, particularly in this climate of rising costs generally. Plus, it means that these animals occupy spaces that could have otherwise been offered to other animals in significant need, possibly because they're at risk of abuse and deliberate cruelty. And some of these spaces are being occupied by animals that humans have intentionally bred to have some traits that cause them harm and put them at additional need. So there is a problem around supply and demand here. I know that's one of the themes that you'll be picking up in your subsequent conference as well. So this increasing popularity of pets with extreme traits leads to this greater demand, which breeders respond to accordingly in some cases. These pets have higher care needs and potentially higher costs associated with that, and they're more likely to suffer due to neglect if people are unable to meet those care needs and those costs. That in turn means they might be more likely to end up in our hands or the hands of other charities, which in turn means there's higher numbers in care, higher costs for the charities, and impacts our ability to help other animals in need. So you can see how this starts to form a vicious cycle of sorts. The responsibility of dealing with some of this oversupply of pets with these additional health needs passes often from the owners to the charities to care for, to treat them and find them new suitable homes, which is not always easy. And very sadly, many of these animals will need to be euthanized on welfare grounds if the treating personnel don't feel that it's feasible for them to recover a suitable quality of life even after treatment. And the images here do show some real cases that we've sadly dealt with. I'll just quickly touch on some of those, just to give a wee bit of colour to things. The first bulldog here is Reggie, our British bulldog. He was signed over into RSPCA care voluntarily by an owner who could no longer cope with his higher care needs, along with a second bulldog companion. Fortunately, both of those dogs do have new owners and are living happy lives. The Chow Chow on the top right, Bruno very sadly had several extreme conformations that were causing him a lot of discomfort and harm, including, well, you can see for yourselves, excessive skin folds, brachycephaly affecting his respiratory function quite significantly, and entropion. So he did receive treatment for all of these, but unfortunately, um, Bruno was ultimately euthanized on welfare grounds due to poor recovery. And I've also included some feline examples. Our Persian cat there in the middle, Ozzy. Ozzy was rescued from a home where there were multiple animals that they couldn't be provided with sufficient care, sadly, by the owner anymore. And shockingly, his brachycephaly was so severe that he couldn't eat um, with his face. And he had taught himself to pick up food with his paw and hand feed himself, because that was the only way he could consume food at all. Even more shockingly, our veterinary personnel reported that when he attempted to purr, his tongue would actually turn blue because of the lack of oxygen. So very sadly, him and several other persons were rescued from that property and did have treatment to alleviate their respiratory problems and are making a good recovery. The bulldog pup is an example from one of my colleagues. This is a 9-week-old bulldog pup with such a severely narrowed trachea that even when at rest, she was struggling to breathe significantly and would lose consciousness during sleep or when trying to eat. And needless to say, she was unfortunately euthanized on welfare grounds. And our last cat is Nemo the Bambino, bottom right, sorry, bottom right. Was rescued from a household breeding many designer cats in so-called designer cats in very unsuitable conditions. And as you can see, Nemo clearly has a significant deformity of both of the forelimbs there, which obviously impairs his mobility and quality of life. So I just wanted to give some real examples because this is what our charity and other charities like us are dealing with, the real rough end of this problem. And it's desperately sad for everyone involved. And in addition to the welfare impacts that I've outlined and the impact it has on charities, these types of cases are also a significant source of moral injury for the personnel involved in their care and treatment. And we've heard from many, many vets and animal health practitioners about the toll that it takes on them personally and professionally, repeatedly seeing animals who are suffering so badly in this way and trying to rectify these problems that have been kind of knowingly created, and often even with the knowledge that even post intervention, these animals are still likely to have a suboptimal quality of life. So it is quite soul destroying for many who are faced with these consequences on a near daily basis and those who are working on the front line. And I'm sure even there'll be people on this call today who can probably relate to that and will have your own personal experiences to draw upon. So what do we want to see change? So our vision for this project is that all companion animals should be bred with innate conformation and physical characteristics that facilitate good health and positive welfare. And this, of course, requires them being born with a body that allows them to conduct behaviours and activities that are necessary for their welfare and normal for their species. And this reflects our interest not only in healthy physical functioning, but also in animals being able to fulfill natural activities and behavioural needs as well. And we would like to see both fewer animals being bred with extreme traits, but also less severe degrees of these extreme features. So a shift towards more moderate features to reduce the level of harm and risk. And again, just to reiterate, we're not looking at eradicating breeds or breed-specific regulation, nor are we interested in demonizing anyone who owns these animals or loves particular breeds. That's not our interest. We are looking to be proactive in calling for collective and meaningful action by everyone who loves and respects dogs to help us reduce this form of suffering. So, historical activities that have aimed to address this issue haven't fully redressed these problems. And we recognise that the complexity of the issue really needs a multifaceted and coordinated approach across various stakeholders, all contributing to building momentum and shifting the social licence and social acceptability around breeding animals with extreme traits. And we feel that creating meaningful change is going to need action by each of these six stakeholder groups that we've identified, recognizing that each of the people within each of these groups are able to influence this problem in a way that's tailored to their expertise and opportunity. But we also hope that this will be coordinated and complementary to what others are doing in the sector. These stakeholder groups aren't mutually exclusive. For example, one might be an animal owner and also a supplier of animals by breeding on a small scale. You might be a veterinary service provider and also in a position to advise as an advisor. You might be an advisor as a charity and also a supplier of animals via rehoming. Or you might be a policymaker in your organisation and also a dog grooming service provider on the side. And of course, we're all members of the public, so we all fall into that sixth category. We developed a theory of change for this wider programme of work that articulates the route towards ending this harmful breeding through working with each of these six stakeholder groups to create these enablers for change. And we felt the key enablers for change would be using and drawing upon the evidence base. And we've heard some great presentations in this conference that are making really valuable contributions to that evidence base. Identifying feasible alternatives to current practice. And again, we've heard conversations yesterday around improving breed health and breed-specific health improvement strategies, which certainly contributes to offering people alternatives to current practice. And of course, delivering education and advice and engagement is a fundamental enabler for people to make better informed decisions. These three enablers in turn support the outputs of greater public awareness of the harm that can result from physical extreme traits and more robust protection for animals at risk. And these in turn are important contributors to changing behaviour around demand for these animals and associated supply. And we do recognise that many breeders are able to pivot in response to changing demand. And this all, of course, is fundamental to achieving that overall goal of reducing the prevalence and severity of animal suffering on account of extreme traits. A quick word, so just to clarify, the strategy that we've put together is intended to cover a 5-year period. So here are just some of the priorities that we'll be looking to progress with in the present year. Educational outreach, as I've just mentioned, we feel is really important, and RSPCA's education teams have already been incorporating learning content on the topic of extreme conformation into their work in the communities and with school children as well, so working with children and young people. We will be releasing this year a public strategy report and associated engagement with various stakeholders to sensitize. Well, this is one example of that type of engagement, raising awareness of what we are trying to do on this issue with other stakeholders and mobilising support, hopefully. We'll also later in the year be launching a public-facing campaign. RSPCA is fortunate in terms of having quite significant media reach. So we are working on well, always working on using those opportunities to engage with media, produce educational content, and share that on the platforms that we have to help with awareness raising. We will continue to support the Canine Innate Health Assessment, which was launched by the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Animal Welfare in November of last year. And following on from that, we're actually leading in the development of a feline, a similar tool for assessing conformational health of cats. And last year, we commissioned some research into the legislative ecosystem in the UK and other European jurisdictions. So we'll be continuing to explore the options that we have in the UK for using legislation and legislative levers as another tool for creating behavioural change. And ultimately, our aim with all of these activities is to start to shift societal attitudes to prioritise health and welfare over aesthetics in our pets. But of course, we can't do this alone, and we need you. We need you as stakeholders to join us and contribute and use your influence and expertise to help us with this mission. So because we disaggregated the project according to these 6 stakeholder groups that I mentioned, we developed one strategic goal related to each of these groups, and that's what I've captured on the following 2 slides. And I would love to invite you to consider which of these stakeholder groups you feel that you belong to, or people in your networks, people in your organizations might be part of, and consider the ways in which you feel you could use your influence and agency as a member of one or more of these stakeholder groups to contribute towards these goals. And as I previously mentioned, these aren't mutually exclusive, so there will be multiple ways that you'll feel able to contribute, I'm sure, within your own domains of influence. So owners refers to both current and prospective owners, including caregivers, guardians, families with responsibility for animal welfare. And our hope is that the work we're doing to target owners will ultimately result in reduced demand for and reduced acquisition of pets with these most severe extreme traits. Suppliers includes breeders, so that might be commercial breeders, hobby breeders, illegal breeders, or accidental breeders. This also covers people who import animals and people who rehome, so that includes charities as well, and people who sell these pets. And our goal is that the supply and breeding of pets with extreme traits and the severity of these traits is reduced as prospective owners start to move away from demanding ever more extreme variants and shift towards more moderate, healthier types of pets. As an animal rescue charity, of course, we also, it will not come as a surprise that we also want to encourage people to consider adoption too, especially when we and other charities are overloaded with so many wonderful dogs and cats and of all shapes and sizes who deserve and desperately need loving homes. And it sometimes comes as a surprise to people to know that this includes a lot of purebred dogs. As I mentioned, some of the additional care needs for some of these breeds mean that we do end up with quite a lot of them in our care as well. So even if people have their heart set on a particular breed, they might still find their perfect match in a rescue centre as well. Of course, we are, and I'm sure many of you will be as well, very concerned about unregulated and in some cases unscrupulous backyard breeders and poor breeding practice. And sadly, some of these people are incentivized to produce ever more extreme dogs that they can then quite aggressively market as being rare, unique, exclusive only to their kennel and that type of thing, which I'm sure you'll have seen. Our intelligence team at RSPCA has found that this type of breeding activity is often intertwined with other forms of animal-related crime. For example, there might be scenarios where someone is involved in illegal dog breeding. They're also involved in unregistered canine fertility clinics. They might also be involved in money laundering, using the dogs as a mechanism for that. They might be involved in dog fighting or other forms of criminality. And I do realise this is a very different scenario from what most of you will visualise when you think of dog breeders in a controlled, regulated, and responsible context. But sadly, this is what we see often and what our intelligence teams are often dealing with. And with the well-intentioned, reputable breeders, when the animal's welfare is being compromised for aesthetics, we would like to see a shift towards breeding for more moderate traits that support better health. And that includes outcrossing when that is deemed necessary to improve breed health. And many more of you here have far more expertise than I do in that. And just to add, we were actually co-funders of the research that Alison Skipper referenced yesterday by the Royal Veterinary College, and we very much welcome any further research that explores practical means of improving breed health, and that includes the very positive progress with assessment tools and health strategies that several of my fellow speakers have outlined. Service providers is an umbrella term referencing practitioners who are involved in animal focused services and are in direct contact with people's pets. So that might be animal health practitioners, so our vets and allied professionals. That might be groomers, trainers, behaviourists, rescue officers, pet sitters, handlers, that kind of personnel. And our goal with the service providers is that these individuals use that wonderful opportunity that they have to be animal welfare advocates and disseminate consistent evidence-based welfare-focused advice to the clients that they come in contact with. And we think service providers are quite uniquely well placed for this because they're often the only people who have repeated direct contact, often quite regular direct contact with owners and caregivers. So it's a great opportunity to educate and support and guide. The next three of the six stakeholders, advisors, we are referring to organisations or individuals who are in positions to influence and advise on companion animal issues. And again, many of you on this call, I'm sure, will see yourself reflected in that category. So that includes charities, professional bodies, breed societies, the academic sector, government agencies, advisory panels, IPFD, yourselves, show judges, individual experts, kind of respected people within the community. And our ask of advisors is to help us contribute to education through sharing and promoting welfare-focused messaging about the impact of extreme traits and using these opportunities that you might have to champion this maybe on one-to-one level with people you interact with or in your organisation's public communications, social media, or your own professional practice where appropriate. The public is fairly self-explanatory, so this is lay people who may or may not already be engaged in animal welfare issues. And our goal with the public is that they gain much better awareness of the impact of extreme traits on animal welfare and start to shift their perception of whether this is an acceptable way for us to treat our animals. And lastly, the sixth category are policymakers and governance. That refers to legislators, enforcers, policymakers, and that is not only restricted to people within government structures, but also recognising that policymakers exist within within industry, corporate bodies, insurance companies, civil society, and other sectors. And our ask of policymakers is to try to use that position and opportunity to offer stronger protection for animals from being bred with extreme traits. Lastly, just to wrap up, in terms of next steps, in the next few weeks, we plan to launch and disseminate our public strategy report. The intention is that this will function as a call to action for people in each of these stakeholder groups to identify how they can contribute to helping us address this welfare problem. as well as outlining the actions and activities that we ourselves will commit to doing. We are planning to accompany that report with the release of a short documentary film to shine a light on the issue and provide a resource that we hope will help members of the public better understand how extreme traits affect welfare and how they can avoid inadvertently promoting or glamorizing some of these very extreme, poorly bred pets via social media, for example. My team will be getting out and about attending various conferences shown here. And in particular, we're delighted to have a speaking spot at the IPFD in Bologna in June, when my colleague Lauren Bennett will be speaking on the supply and demand theme and how this interacts with extreme conformation. So contributing to the conversation around that supply and demand topic from the animal charity perspective. So please do look out for Lauren. Please do reach out to her if this is an area of interest to you. And indeed, if you have ideas on how your organisation or you might be able to support our work in this area. And later in the year, we'll be launching a public-facing campaign in the UK. And again, this will be aimed at educating the public, raising awareness, and starting to shift attitudes towards prioritising welfare over aesthetics in pets. And finally, throughout the year, we do have ongoing media activity, and that includes proactive seasonal content as well as reactive content when opportunities arise. So please do look out for that, and please do share our public-facing content if you can. We're very grateful.